There are moments when the world whispers to you that nothing you do matters. A cashier forgets to say thank you. A friend does not notice your sacrifice. A kind word you offered is swallowed by silence. The soul feels small, an ember in a storm, and the longing to be seen grows heavy. But listen, there is a different ledger than the one we see with our eyes. There is a record that no rust can touch, a witness that never sleeps. In that record, a smile can be heavier than a kingdom, and a drop of water given to a thirsty traveler can turn into a river of light that carries a heart into the gardens. My brother, my sister, this story is for the one who thinks their smallness disqualifies them from greatness. It is for the person who feels the weight of their little means and the bitterness of being overlooked. It is for anyone who has ever dimmed their light because the world did not applaud. In a quiet quarter of an old city where roofs leaned on one another like companions and the streets remembered the feet of saints and sinners alike, lived a cobbler named Hassan. He had the hands of someone who had learned patience from leather and soles, calloused, patient, careful. His home was a single room where a narrow bed and a small shelf held more patches of mending than possessions. He ate simply and slept early, his schedule arranged around prayer. Hassan's life was not the product of dramatic turns. It had no banners, no fame, no lineage that commanded respect on the market. He was ordinary in the ways of the world. No horses, no letters from noble men, no lush robes, but he was extraordinary in one quiet habit he never advertised. Before the masjid bells heard the muaddin call for Fajr, Hassan walked through a narrow lane behind the baker's stall. In a shadowed nook sat an old man, blind, carrying the world in the bowl beside him. He was thin as a question and soft as an unasked prayer. Each morning Hassan would drop half a loaf or a few dates, or sometimes a coin the size of regret. Sometimes, when he had nothing else, he would simply greet the old man. "Assalamu alaikum, my brother." The greeting was like a match struck under winter rain, small, but it created warmth. People who watch this might say, "He does not make a difference. The blind man is still alone. The streets are full of need. What does a cobbler's loaf do?" And Hassan would only smile and keep walking. For he served not for cameras or applause, but because something in him responded to the small cry of another human need. He had learned from lines in the Quran and stories whispered at the masjid that deeds are not measured only by their size, but by the sincerity that lifts them. Years passed in the rhythm of prayer and mending, of dawn bread and evening repair. Hassan married once, and his wife's hands were softer than his, gentling the house in ways his skill never could. They had a child, a girl, with a laugh like spilled water. The family's joy did not alter their poverty, it only made their little needs more human. When their daughter grew sick, Hassan spent the little he had on medicines, and the half loaf he had left for the blind man became a prayer, left empty-handed. Yet still he walked to the alley in the morning, whispered his greeting to the corner where the old blind man had sat for decades, and sometimes, if the corner was empty, he would leave a prayer. One winter morning, the alley was empty. No bowl, no thin figure. Silence sat like a folded robe over the street. Hassan's chest tightened in a way that made him 2 years older. He asked at the market, and the baker shrugged. Maybe he moved on. People go. Time takes them. Hassan returned to the masjid and heard the imam recite, "So whoever does an atom's weight of good will see it, and whoever does an atom's weight of evil will see it." He felt the words settle into him with the particular gravity of direct speech. The hadith the Imam later shared completed the circle. Do not belittle any good deed, even if it is meeting your brother with a smiling face. Smiling. A small thing the Prophet ﷺ had taught, yet he spoke of it as if it were a lever that moves mountains. Something flipped in Hassan that day. The invisible became visible in his imagination. The bowl of the blind man, the way light had courted his beard, the small altar of gratitude the old man carried between his ribs. Hassan realized his routine had not been merely an act of habit. It had been a thread in a tapestry he could not yet see. We live in a world that prizes spectacle, and so we often mistake size for significance. Yet the Deen asks us to be builders of quiet things, not to be architects of spectacle, but cultivators of hearts. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Save yourselves from the fire, even by giving half a date in charity." Think of that. Half a date, the single weight of a seed from which a tree grows. A measure so small that those of us who live with abundance call it nothing. But in the hand of Allah, small is never trivial. Hassan's story then folded into the lives of others in ways he never imagined. The old blind man, it turned out, had a family. He used to tell his son in the soundless language of memory, because he could not see faces, of mornings when a man's footsteps seemed to bring the dawn closer. He called that man the one with the patient hands. His son carried that memory as a kind of map. Many years later, standing in youth and strength, he sought out the cobbler whose half-loaves had fed his father's patience. He found Hassan, now older, a man whose beard had begun to mimic the gray of the city wall. "Your father prayed for you," the son told Hassan one evening. The words landed with the weight of a treasure. Every morning he would say, "May Allah bless the one who gives me bread. May Allah make his face light on the day of judgment." Hassan could only bow his head, a flood breaking him open. He wept until his tears were like soft iron, hot and healing. He had thought his tiny arms were lost in the churn of the city. Instead, they had been stored in a heart and turned into a daily prayer, a currency more precious than all markets could print. Here is one of the deeper truths we seldom taste until we are close to the end. Our deeds become more than what they are. They are seeds that find soil, not only in this life but in the next. A greeting, a meal, a whispered dua for a stranger, these are transactions with eternity. When we think our act is too small, remember, the day the angels knock on the door of the world, they will carry with them the records of the small things that shone. Hassan lived long enough to see many small ripples. He watched a young man, a student of the masjid, collect scraps of leather and turn them into sandals for the boys who could not afford them. He saw a woman leave bowls of broth on the step for travelers who passed through at night. Each small thing struck him like a bell, proof that mercy is not centralized in palaces but scattered in humble hands. There was a widow named Amina who lived 3 doors down. She was the sort of soul that the world often forgets in its list of urgent problems, old, stoic, bearing grief as if it were a cloak she had been taught to wear. Amina had a habit. Each Friday, she would bake a small flatbread and leave it at the masjid's door with a short note, "For those who feel alone this Friday." Sometimes the notice was read by those who were hungry and sometimes by those who were not. Once, a young orphan picked up the bread and the note and kept it as if it were scripture. He later grew into a man who became a pillar of a small Quran class for neighborhood children. He would remember that flat bread as the first sign of an adult who had tenderness enough to make space in her bread for strangers. Amina's small bread had been a push on the lever of someone's heart that created ripples decades later. We must stop treating our resources as the only measure for whether we can give. The scale Allah uses is not the world's scale. Sincerity is multiplied in ways that dwarf our understanding. A woman who gives a smile to her husband when he returns home in a bad mood, a student who corrects another kindly, a neighbor who invites a lonely family for a small meal, these are deeds with exponential power. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Whoever guides someone to goodness will have a reward like the one who did it." So when you share beneficial knowledge, you plant 1,000 branches of charity that continue to produce fruit long after your voice has gone silent. Let me tell you of a merchant named Farid. He was a man of moderate means, a seller of glassware whose counters were polished and whose ledgers were meticulous. He was known as someone who ran his business with a sharp mind but a mild temper. Once in Ramadan, a traveler stumbled into his shop, hungry and dusty, and asked for a jug of water. Farid did not have much to spare on that particular day. His stock had been low. He thought for a moment and then, with more feeling than calculation, offered the traveler a cup and some dates without charge. The traveler's face lit up as if a lamp had been set between his hands. That traveler left and never returned to the city. But years later, one of Farid's customers told him how his child had been led back to the path of Islam by a teacher who himself had once been the recipient of a merchant's kindness on a desert road. The merchant learned that a cup of water given in a foreign place had traveled like a seed in a bird's beak and planted itself where he would never see. We share now a generation of quick returns and social proof where everything seems validated only if recorded. But some of the most important accounts are private. The Prophet ﷺ did many things publicly, but he also taught the value of private charity and silent kindness. He warned against the trumpet of righteousness, the person who performs good deeds for applause. The noblest acts are those that no one can applaud because their audience is only Allah. When Hassan's daughter married, it was not to a prince. Her groom was a teacher, a man of middle circumstances whose wealth consisted of books and patience. Hassan helped with what he could, not much more than a repaired pair of shoes and a blessing. At the wedding feast, someone joked about how humble the gifts were, and others laughed. The teacher looked at Hassan and said, "My teacher once told me, the best gifts are the ones given with pure intention. The value is not in cloth or silver, but in righteousness." Hassan's eyes were full of a satisfied tear. He had mended shoes and stitched a seam of dignity for his daughter, and the world's scorn could not take away the goodness tucked into that act. There was also the story of a small child named Yusuf, who grew up picking up scraps from the masjid floor to make a small living. Once he found under a pew a crumpled note with a few words, "Whoever finds this, feed the poor tonight." Yusuf took the message as if it were a command and divided his last coin to buy a little stew. He shared it with 3 other boys, and afterward the boys prayed in a way a child will pray when he feels that he has been part of something sacred. That night, Yusuf slept with the feeling that he had been engaged in responsibility, and he later became imam, teaching gentle lessons about responsibility drawn from a memory of sharing a bit of stew. A small directive placed under a pew, turning into the formation of a life. The lesson is consistent. Small acts have a habit of growing without consent. They become agents of change, moving between people like secret letters. Sometimes we are the invisible agents ourselves, and sometimes our lives are the ones that keep receiving quiet benefits from unknown benefactors. If you are reading this and thinking, I have nothing to offer, I speak to you. You have your breath, your intentions, your eyes, your hands, your presence. Plenty of people have changed the world by what they are, not by what they possess. The woman who sits in the corner and forgives the one who wronged her, that forgiveness softens the ground for reconciliation. The father who reads 2 lines of the Quran to his child each night, that habit is a canal dug into a parched land leading to future gardens. The brother who helps carry a sibling's burden, he does not only lift a sack, he lifts a heart. There will come days when what you do feels like nothing at all. You will give your last coin and the person will not even say thank you. You will forgive and the other will not notice. You will plant a seed and the soil will seem barren. Those are the days to hold to the hadith that says actions are but by intentions, and that the most beloved deeds to Allah are the consistent small ones, even if they are few. Big bursts of devotion are beautiful, but long rivers of small, consistent acts wear down mountains in time. Remember this too, the small things are the crucible of sincerity. It is easy to be generous when crowds watch. It is hard to be generous when the night is full of loneliness. When you give in private, your transaction is stripped bare of pretense. Your obedience to Allah becomes raw and true. The angels relish such private deeds. They do not clap. Their recording is more tender than applause. They are the witnesses to the subtle mercy you carry, and their company is a comfort for the one whose public ledger is empty. On the day of judgment, when scales will tip and nations will tremble, you might be astonished to see the weight of that one small deed. There will be persons whose full accounting surprises them, not because they remember doing something huge, but because of one small habit they kept. A regular dua, a single smile shared with people who needed it, a daily greeting, a folded charity. And then there will be those who thought themselves secure, but whose hearts were brittle from neglecting long, small acts. Hassan died quietly, as was his way, on a night when the moon wrestled with a cloud. A young student sat by him and held his hand as breath left like a thing learned. In his last hour, Hassan smiled, not because he knew the date of his reckoning, but because he felt certain of the grace that had rested on his small life. He had never been a notable scholar. He had not led armies or built schools. He had been a man of hands that knew how to fix souls and at the same time understood how to plant seeds of mercy. The student buried him and told the story of the half-loaf and the blind man in assemblies. And the tale grew like a palm tree that shaded others passing by. Let this be your mirror tonight. Look at the small things you perform. Maybe you fold someone's sorrow into your chest and cover it with dua. Perhaps you deliver a tray of food to a neighbor, and your name is not even remembered. Perhaps you hold your tongue and spare someone the sting of your sarcasm. These small acts are not lost. They are preserved by the one who is most just and most merciful. The scale is not the same as human judgment. The scales Allah uses are calibrated by mercy and intention. So rise in the smallness you carry and be generous with what you can. Smile when you can. Feed when you can, even if it is a half date. Give someone the warmth of your presence. Teach what you know, correct with softness, forgive. Leave notes of encouragement where hands will find them. Make your life a constellation of small lights rather than waiting to be a single blinding sun. And when the world does not notice, do not be broken. The ultimate audience is the most generous. He counts what you cannot see. He rewards what you cannot calculate. He keeps a record that is more patient than time and more faithful than memory. When your courage is thin, remember the hadith. The best deeds are those done consistently, even if they are small. Stick to your small deeds as if your life depends on them. Perhaps it does. Finally know this. You are never too small to matter. The cup you hand to a thirsty passerby might be the hinge that opens a heart. The apology you offer might be the bridge between estranged souls. The dua you whisper in the dark might be the warmth that saves someone's night. Do these things not for the show, not for the retweets of the heartless world, but for the one who measures by scales we cannot imagine. If anyone ever tells you that your little act was meaningless, answer with the patience of the one who knows the value of silence. Keep doing good quietly. Keep giving what little you have. Keep smiling when it is costly. Keep praying when your voice is the only witness. The world will miss your story sometimes, but the heavens will keep it safe. For one day, in a place where all accounts will be balanced and every small light will be seen, you will find that the handfuls you thought were nothing are actually the keys you wished you had guarded more carefully. And you will say humbly and with a weight that feels like both regret and gratitude, Ya Rab, I wish I had done more of what I could in smallness. Then Allah, most merciful, will respond in ways for which we have no words but hope, because He is most generous to those who sought to please Him with the little they had. Never underestimate a small good deed. Never shrink your mercy to the size of the world's approval. For what you call small may be the very thing that becomes the light of someone's night, the turning point of a life, the seed of a sunnah revived, the gentleness that mends a family, the inspiration that births a movement. Plant your small acts like seeds and trust the gardener. He will grow a forest where you thought there would only be a sapling. And when you stand before your Lord, perhaps what will astonish you is not the great things you did, but the small ones you forgot. A smile you gave, a bread you shared, a moment you forgave, rising before you like stars, saying, we were for Allah, and we were done so quietly that the world did not notice. But here we are, luminous because of His view. Go now and be small in the eyes of the world, but great in the sight of the one who never misses an atom's weight of goodness.
Assalamu alaikum.